Okay, we can go ahead and get started. It's good to see you guys this morning after the week after or Sunday after Thanksgiving rather. I hope you guys had a good holiday. I did. I was with family and it was great. So feels good to be back for a Sunday though teaching. We are, of course, surprise, surprise, continuing on in Genesis. We're covering some more chapters, obviously, about Joseph, but more specifically, we're going to cover today Joseph's reintroduction to his family and all of the family dynamics that come out in that. Because remember, they did not leave off in a good place. To say the least, they did not leave off in a good place. So let me pray, and then we will start in Genesis chapter 42. God, thank you so much for your goodness to us and for giving us time and space to study the scriptures together. Holy Spirit, would you guide our discussion and our questions and our teaching this morning as we explore what it is you have to teach us through the life and story of Joseph. God, we love you and we trust you. It's in your son's name we pray. Amen. So Genesis chapter 42 and then the following chapters, again, reintroduce us back to Jacob and Joseph's brothers. Because for the past several chapters, it's pretty much just been Joseph. It's been Joseph in Egypt. It's been, remember with me, Joseph in Potiphar's house. Then we have Joseph in prison for a long time. We have Joseph interpreting dreams. We have Joseph getting out of prison. We have Joseph rising in the ranks, right, to being the second most powerful person in Egypt, essentially, which, again, for a foreigner, to reach that position was relatively unheard of. That wasn't something that happened, obviously. And yet Joseph becomes that person. He becomes the person who is in charge when famine hits, which of course is what he predicted via Pharaoh's dream. And so now we begin to see the far-reaching effects of this famine. It's not just Egypt proper that is impacted. It is all of the kind of area around it, what we would consider Palestine today, all of these areas, and then further east of, or Israel, all these places, right, are experiencing famine. And Egypt seems to be, at least based on the story we have in front of us, the one place that actually was able to kind of stockpile and plan for this famine, again, because of the dream that God gave Pharaoh that then Joseph interpreted. And so people are flocking to Egypt to get grain and to be able to survive. This is not we want to go to Egypt so we get something different or so we get something better than what we have here. It's no, we're going to die if we don't go to Egypt, right? Which we get a little bit hinted at in this story starting in chapter 42. Look at verse 1. It says, when Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, why do you just keep looking at each other? He continued, I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us so that we may live and not die. Let's just pause right there for a second. Again, no, this is a shift in the story. We've been with Joseph for several chapters now. We haven't heard anything. We don't even know if Jacob's still alive. We don't know the state of Joseph's brothers. We don't know the state of kind of their tribe or their clan. And so we're reintroduced to Jacob. He's still alive. He is quite old at this point, and Joseph's brothers seem to be doing well as well, except they are in fear of starving. They're in danger of having no food. And Jacob looks at them and says, why are you just sitting around looking at each other? Why don't you go do something? Which is such a dad thing to say, right? Why are you just sitting around? Go do something, right? So he sends them to Egypt to get food. And then we're told in verse 3, then 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with the others because he was afraid that harm might come to him. So Israel's sons were among those who went to buy grain, and there was famine in the land of Canaan also. No, remember with me, when we were introduced to Joseph, one of the very first things we learned about Joseph, in the first chapter he comes up in the book of Genesis, we learned that he is Jacob's favorite, right? He gets this special cloak. It is not only unstated, it is also pretty much overtly stated as well that he is his father's favorite, because he is the firstborn of Rachel, who was his father's favorite wife. And so now Benjamin has become this kind of like cherished son, because he's the last son that Jacob has of his beloved wife Rachel. He is Joseph's only full brother. And so Benjamin has kind of risen in the ranks to that place of favorite, beloved child. And so Benjamin is not allowed to go on this journey. Obviously, it's not overtly stated, but pretty obvious to us and to how the narrator is telling the story, because of what happened to Joseph 20 plus years earlier. Jacob is once again kind of taken on a favorite son, and he is guarding Benjamin. Benjamin is more than Benjamin's not like a child, okay? Like he's, at least he's like a young man. At most, he's maybe married with kids. Like he's not like 5, okay? He's old enough to be an adult. And yet his father says, no, you don't go to Egypt, you stay here. Because again, Jacob is afraid of what happened to Joseph. So he doesn't allow Benjamin to go. The other brothers go. Verse 6, now Joseph was the governor of the land, the person who sold grain to all its people. So when Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. As soon as Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he pretended to be a stranger and spoke harshly to them. Where do you come from, he asked. From the land of Canaan, they replied, to buy food. Although Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Then he remembered his dreams about them and said to them, you are spies. You have come to see our land, where our land is unprotected. No, my lord, they answered, your servants have come to buy food. We are all the sons of one man. Your servants are honest men, not spies. No, he said to them, you have come to see where our land is unprotected. But they replied, your servants were 12 brothers, the sons of one man who lives in the land of Canaan. The youngest one now is with our father, and one is no more. Joseph said to them, it is just as I told you, you are spies, and this is how you will be tested. As surely as Pharaoh lives, you will not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of your number to get your brother. The rest of you will be kept in prison so that your words may be tested to see if you are telling the truth. If you are not, then as surely as Pharaoh lives, you are spies. And he put them in custody for 3 days. Let's stop right there for a second. Go back to the very first verse I read, verse 6. Now Joseph was the governor of the land. Again, remember, we've heard in previous chapters, he has risen in the ranks. He's out of prison now. Pharaoh has seen him interpret dreams to the saving effect of Egypt, right? Without Joseph, Egypt perishes. The whole land around them perish. And yet, here Joseph, as a foreigner, is now the governor of the land. So not only has he risen in the ranks to being the second most powerful person in Egypt, simply because he's not going to become Pharaoh, but just think about this. You have a person who is in charge of food during a famine. You have this one person, this one man, this singular figure who is in charge of food during a famine. That person is the most powerful person in the world. Like, we have sci-fi novels and stuff being written to this effect, right? We have like TV shows and things on like Apple TV being written and produced and directed to this kind of storyline, which is essentially where science tells us we are heading at some period of time, where we're going to run out of the ability to grow our own food enough to feed all the people we have. Joseph is the most powerful person. He is in charge. He answers only to Pharaoh, but he is in charge of where the food goes, which means he's in charge of life. Not only human life, but animal life as well. If there's no crops for you, there's definitely no crops for your animals. He is in charge of all of this. He is a powerful person. For all intents and purposes, he is Egyptian. And he has risen in the ranks and now holds all this power. And his brothers come to him, and just like he saw in his dreams 20 plus years earlier, they bow down before him, asking for wheat. Remember, they're depicted as sheaves of wheat in one of his dreams. And they bow down before him, and they ask him for food, and he decides to essentially, some people think he's testing them. Some people think he's getting back at them a little bit. I think it's all of the above. Joseph doesn't have to be some high, holy, lofty person for us to think, he definitely is kind of, maybe digging the dagger in a little bit. And he tells them, no, I don't believe you, you're spies, which honestly and legitimately was a concern for Egypt at this time and throughout its history. Like any major world power, spies are an issue. Having your borders crossed is an issue. Being open or being susceptible to attack is an issue. So this is a legitimate claim he's making. He knows that's not why they're there, but this is a legitimate threat. So it wouldn't have been strange for the Egyptians around him to go, oh yeah, he's wanting to hold them for 3 days? That sounds good to us. That makes sense, right? Yeah, of course you want to protect your border and protect your land. So he tells them, I'm going to send one back. You bring this younger brother you say exists, is basically what he's saying. And not until that one brother comes back with this youngest brother, then I'll release all of you and you can have food and whatever. He keeps him for 3 days. And then for some reason, he changes his mind a little bit on this plan. Look at verse 18. On the third day, Joseph said to them, do this and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers stay here in prison, while the rest of you go and take grain back for your starving households. But you must bring your youngest brother to me, so that your words may be verified, and that you may not die. This they proceeded to do. So he switches tact, and he says, okay, he reverses it. He's like, I'll keep one of you here, the rest of you go back. Probably because he knew that one person isn't going to be able to carry and to transport all the grain needed to sustain the rest of their family's lives. All of these brothers have wives and children. Their children have children more than likely, especially the older brothers. This is a clan. This is not like, oh, it's just our dad and a couple people back home. We need a couple bags of grain. They need enough grain to sustain maybe hundreds of people. So they got a lot to take back. Verse 21, they said to one another, surely we are being punished because of our brother, i.e. Joseph, right? We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life, but we would not listen. That's why this distress has come on us. Reuben replied, didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? Of course, oldest brother's going, didn't I tell you all those years ago, don't do this, right? He's really held on to that. But you wouldn't listen. Now we must give an accounting for his blood. They did not realize Joseph could understand them, since he was using an interpreter. He turned away from them and began to weep, but then came back and spoke to them again. He had Simeon taken from them and bound before their eyes. Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain, to put each man's silver back in his sack, and to give them provisions for the journey. After this was done for them, they loaded their grain on their donkeys and left. At one place where they stopped for the night, one of them opened his sack to get feed for his donkey, and he saw his silver in the mouth of his sack. My silver has been returned, he said to his brothers. Here it is in my sack. Their hearts sank, and they turned to each other trembling and said, what is this that God has done to us? When they came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened to them. They said, the man who is Lord over the land spoke harshly to us and treated us as though we were spying on the land. But we said to him, we are honest men, we are not spies. We were 12 brothers, sons of one father. One is no more, and the youngest now is with our father in Canaan. Then the man who is Lord over the land said to us, this is how I will know whether you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers here with me, and take food for your starving households and go. But bring your youngest brother to me, so I will know you are not spies, but honest men. Then I will give your brother back to you, and you can trade in the land. As they were emptying their sacks there, in each man's sack was his pouch of silver. When they and their father saw the money pouches, they were frightened. Their father Jacob said to them, you have deprived me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more, and now you want to take Benjamin. Everything is against me. Then Reuben said to his father, you may put both of my sons to death if I do not bring him back to you. Entrust him to my care, and I will bring him back. But Jacob said, my son will not go down there with you. His brother is dead, and he is the only one left. If harm comes to him on the journey you are taking, you will bring my gray head down to the grave in sorrow. The family dynamics continue, right? The brothers come back. They, of course, discover the silver. They're afraid. Jacob is also afraid. And yet he persists in not allowing Benjamin to go with him. Even after Reuben makes this grave promise of saying, if something happens to Benjamin on my watch, then you can kill my two sons, i.e. your grandsons, which is, of course, a severe promise, right? He's not joking. This is a severe, oath that he's taking. He is saying, I am assuming full responsibility for my younger brother, Benjamin, and trust him to my care. And Jacob persists in saying no, because he's afraid, understandably so. This has not gone well. He even says, I've lost Joseph, but he's also lost Simeon. Simeon's still back in Egypt. And this is not a close journey. This journey takes a long time to go all the way back to Canaan, all the way to Egypt, all the way back and forth and back and forth. And so Simeon is going to be in prison essentially until they run out of food again. Notice Jacob does not immediately say, oh man, Simeon's in jail, take Benjamin, go get him. He's like, he's gone. I've lost him too, right? He doesn't do anything about Simeon. He waits until they run out of food again, which is inevitable. Like the story is kind of leading us to this place where it's inevitable. They are going to run out of food again. But poor Simeon sits in jail this whole time because Jacob refuses to let Benjamin go. This is what we get to in chapter 43. It says, now the famine was still severe in the land. So when they had eaten all the grain that they had brought back from Egypt, their father said to them, go back and buy us a little more food. But Judah, notice we've had Reuben kind of speak up, and now we get Judah. But Judah said to him, the man warned us solemnly, you will not see my face again unless your brother is with you. If you will send our brother along with us, we will go down and buy food for you. But if you will not send him, we will not go down, because the man said to us, you will not see my face again unless your brother is with you. To me, there's a million ways to handle this. The story doesn't do that because the story is pushing us towards this reunion with Joseph. But to me, I'm like, surely Jacob has servants he can send, right? Surely he has servants he can send that Joseph would, or that anyone in Egypt would have no idea it's from the same family, right? So send them, and never going to be a problem. Also, can one of the servants not pretend to be Benjamin? Like, in my mind, I'm like, there's a million ways to handle this, right? But no, they don't do that. Israel, in verse 6, he says, why did you bring this trouble on me by telling the man you had another brother? They're like, we didn't think it was going to be a problem, right? They replied, the man questioned us closely about ourselves and our family. Is your father still living, he asked us. Do you have another brother? We simply answered his questions. How are we to know? He would say, bring your brother down here. Then Judah said to Israel, his father, send the boy along with me, and we will go at once, so that we and you and our children may live and not die. I myself will guarantee his safety. You can hold me personally responsible for him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him here before you, I will bear the blame before you all my life. As it is, if we are delayed, if we had not delayed, we have gone and returned twice. So again, we have Reuben earlier saying, hey, I'll take responsibility and do this. Now Judah is saying, I'll take responsibility and do this. Judah is pleading with his father. He's like, if we don't go soon, we will die. You will die. We will die. Our children will die. We have to go back to Egypt. And he promises his father, I will bring Benjamin back to you, right? So here's what Israel does in verse 11. Then their father Israel said to them, if it must be, then do this. Put some of the best products of the land in your bags and take them down to the man as a gift. A little balm and a little honey, some spices and myrrh, some pistachio nuts and almonds. Take double the amount of silver with you, for you must return the silver that was put back into the mouths of your sacks. Perhaps it was a mistake. Take your brother also and go back to the man at once, and may God Almighty grant you mercy before that man, so that he will let your brother and Benjamin come back with you. As for me, if I am bereaved, I am bereaved. So they go back to Egypt. Again, this kind of sounds a little, this idea of him making a plan sounds a little familiar. It sounds a little bit like Jacob's reunion with Esau, where he sends all of these gifts ahead, right? He loads down his servants with silver and gold and all kinds of stuff and animals. And so he's trying to kind of sweeten the deal a little bit, maybe calm some of the negative emotions that are there on what he perceives on this person in Egypt's part. So he sends gifts of the land, these kind of like well-known tradable, sought-after commodities, common and popular in Canaan, honey, almonds, these types of things, right? So they take all these things back with them. I'm not going to read all of the rest of this chapter because we got to still get through 2 more chapters. He sends them back. They meet with Joseph, and they're still afraid. Joseph brings them into his house, rather, and he's going to have a meal with them. And then he finds out more. He sees Benjamin, all these things, right? Take a look at verse 24. They're in Joseph's house, right? Of course, and let me just say this. Think about this. There are, I don't even know, tons of people, thousands of people flocking to Egypt to get food. These brothers, the sons of Israel here, are not a singular event. Again, Joseph is having to manage all of this grain distribution. And yet he invites these random people who are foreigners to the Egyptians. They're foreigners to the Egyptians. They are well off in their own way, but they're not as powerful as Egypt. They're not as rich as Egypt. They look different. They talk different. They smell funny, whatever it might be. They've been on the road for a long time, right? And Joseph, out of all of the people visiting Egypt, some of whom probably would have been somewhat powerful, right? They're probably trading with other nations and whatnot. Joseph has this group of kind of ragtag people into his house, which would have been quite ornate, more than likely, would have been somewhat lavish. And he tells his steward, here's what I want to do. So verse 24, the steward took the men into Joseph's house, gave them water to wash their feet, and provided fodder for their donkeys. They prepared their gifts for Joseph's arrival at noon, but they had heard that because they had heard that they were to eat there. When Joseph came home, they presented to him the gifts they had brought into his house, and they bowed down before him to the ground. Again, notice we have them bowing down twice now. He has two dreams about them bowing down. Here we go again. He asked them how they were, and then he said, how is your aged father you told me about? Is he still living? They replied, your servant, our father, is alive and well. And they bowed down, prostrating themselves before him. As he looked about and saw his brother Benjamin, his own mother's son, he asked, is this your youngest brother, the one you told me about? And he said, God be gracious to you, my son. Deeply moved at the sight of his brother, Joseph hurried out and looked for a place to weep. He went into his private room and wept there. After he had washed his face, he came out, and controlling himself, he said, serve the food. They served him by himself, the brothers by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate with them by themselves, because Egyptians could not eat with Hebrews, for that is detestable to Egyptians. So they're eating separately, but Joseph is making sure they're fed, right? The men had been seated before him in the order of their ages, from firstborn to the youngest, and they looked at each other as in astonishment. When portions were served to them from Joseph's table, Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much as anyone else's. So they feasted and drank freely with him. Joseph, of course, it continues to be this balance of, and we're about to see it play out even to a further degree. It continues to be a balance of testing them to see if their character has changed or matured since his last interactions with his brothers, but also of kind of getting back at them a little bit. And I don't think that it has to be one or the other. I think it can be both. Joseph is human, right? He's not perfect. And we kind of see this dynamic kind of continually bounce back and forth. And we're about to see it even more. He's really going to test them to see what their character is like now in chapter 44. Let's look at this, see what happens. Verse 1, now Joseph gave these instructions to the steward of his house. Fill the men's sacks with as much food as they can carry, and put each man's silver in the mouth of his sack. Then put my cup, the silver one, in the mouth of the youngest one's sack, along with the silver for his grain. And he did as Joseph said. As morning dawned, the men were sent on their way with their donkeys. They had not gone far from the city when Joseph said to his steward, go after those men at once. And when you catch up with them, say to them, why have you repaid good with evil? Isn't this the cup my master drinks from and also uses for divination? This is a wicked thing you have done. Joseph, of course, obviously sets them up. I read one scholar who was like, because it says at the end of 43, they feasted and drank freely with him. It's like, yeah, they're a little hungover that next morning, right? Like they're kind of like trying to get ready to go, and they're like, la-di-da, here we go, like get the donkeys, and they're just not quite all there. The text doesn't say that, but I think it's funny to think that might be what's going on. I mean, they feasted and drank freely, it says. So here we go. And Joseph, of course, this poor steward has to be like, he's got to go home to his wife and be like, Joseph has lost it. Like, this man's in charge of everything, and he's telling me to do these weird things. Like, that steward's got to be like, I don't know what this guy's doing, right? He puts the silver back in their sacks. He puts Joseph's special kind of silver cup in Benjamin's sack. We're told that this cup is both Joseph's that he drinks out of, but he also uses it for divination, which was a common practice in Egypt and other cultures. You would, kind of how we talk about reading tea leaves. That's kind of the idea. You have some vessel that you would then pour a certain liquid into, maybe some other things, and then you would look at it or look at how it poured out or look at the contents of it, depending on the culture and depending on the type of cup, to discern the will of the gods, or discern the future, or discern if you should go to war, or discern if you should do this or that, right? We tend to, when we read the Old Testament, we tend to read it as if these people are Christians. Joseph was not a Christian. He was an Israelite, but he was also Egyptian and had grown up really in Egypt. So is he worshiping Yahweh? Maybe alongside the Egyptian pantheon, right? Would not have been uncommon. He talks about God a little bit, right? He's like, I fear God, which would not be uncommon for Egyptians and for anyone else who's polytheist to be like, yeah, I fear your God too. You fear my God. Like that doesn't mean he's like, oh, I'm worshiping God. It just means, yeah, that's how we talk here, right? Much like when we read the book of Exodus and we're like, oh, these people, they come out of slavery, and why are they acting so weird and they don't trust God? Because they've been pagans for 400 years. They haven't been worshiping Yahweh alone for 400 years in slavery. So Joseph is Egyptian. And by that I mean he is more than likely deeply embedded in the Egyptian cults, and maybe still has kind of like a toe in kind of the Israelite cult as well. But he has this cup that he uses for divination, and he tells the steward, hide this in Benjamin's bag or his sack with the grain and with the extra silver. So the steward does this, maybe scratching his head in the meantime, going, I don't know what this is about, but I'll do it. And so then, of course, the inevitable happens. The servant is sent to pursue the brothers. The brothers do the thing where they're like, look, we didn't take your cup. We didn't take your silver. So if you find it in one of our sacks, then you can, basically kill or take that person. Because they're so sure that none of them has done this. Much like, remember, when Laban comes after Jacob when Rachel has stolen the household gods, and Jacob says, if you find them, you can kill the person who has taken them. Of course, Laban doesn't find them, but it's the same kind of idea, right? So we see this kind of parallel. So notice, we're kind of going to zoom forward a little bit. Verse 11, they've been found and they've been caught, and now it says, each of them quickly lowered his sack to the ground and opened it. Then the steward proceeded to search, beginning with the oldest and ending with the youngest. And the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. At this, they tore their clothes. Then they all loaded their donkeys and returned to the city. Joseph was still in his house when Judah and his brothers came in. Notice, it specifies Judah because Judah is the one who made the last promise to his father, saying, I will take care of Benjamin. Right? I will, you can hold me in contempt for the rest of my life if I do not bring him back to you. So Judah and his brothers came in. They threw themselves to the ground before him. Again, we have this now multiple times, them bowing before Joseph, just like his dreams. Joseph said to them, what is this you have done? Don't you know that a man like me can find things out by divination? What can we say, my lord? Judah replied. What can we say? How can we prove our innocence? God has uncovered your servant's guilt. He's talking about himself. We are now my Lord's slaves, we ourselves and the one who was found to have the cup. But Joseph said, far be it from me to do such a thing. Only the man who was found to have the cup will become my slave. The rest of you go back to your father in peace. Joseph is pushing this to as far as it can go. Again, he's testing them. He's like, will you abandon this brother who clearly is your father's favorite to save yourselves or to, whatever. He's pushing the limits with this. Verse 18, then Judah went up to him and said, pardon your servant, my lord. Let me speak a word to my lord. Do not be angry with your servant, though you are equal to Pharaoh himself. My lord asked his servant, do you have a father or a brother? And we answered, we have an aged father, and there is a young son born to him in his old age. His brother is dead, and he is the only one of his mother's sons left, and his father loves him. Then you said to your servants, bring him down to me, so that I can see him for myself. And we said to my lord, the boy cannot leave his father. If he leaves him, his father will die. But you told your servants, unless your youngest brother comes down with you, you will not see my face again. And we went back to your servant, my father, and we told him what my lord had said. So he just summarizes the whole story back to Joseph. He has this long kind of discourse with him. And then jump ahead to verse 27. Your servant, my father, said to us, you know that my wife bore me 2 sons. One of them went away from me, that's Joseph, and I said, he has surely been torn to pieces, and I have not seen him since. If you take this one from me too, Benjamin, and harm comes to him, you will bring my gray head down to the grave in misery. Now, if the boy is not with us, when I go back to your servant, my father, and if my father, whose life is closely bound up with the boy's life, sees that the boy isn't there, he will die. Your servants will bring the gray head of our father down to the grave in sorrow. Which was the opposite of, this is kind of the antithesis of how you would want to talk about dying back then. So what you would want to do is you would want to talk about two phrases that we get often. Something that is like full of years. That's kind of a phrase that gets thrown around. They died full of years, or you would die in the company of your whole family. And so they're saying you are taking those two things, being full of years, which means full of good years, at a good old age, not a miserable old age, right? But at a good old age, and they're saying what you're going to do if you keep Benjamin here is our father is going to die in a disrespected state, almost, in a less than ideal state. He's old, but rather than dying in a good old age, he's going to die in a miserable old age, essentially. And so this is what he tells him in verse 32. Your servant, that's Judah speaking, your servant, I guaranteed the boy's safety to my father. I said, if I do not bring him back to you, I will bear the blame before you, my father, all my life. Now then, please, let your servant, Judah, me, who's speaking, remain here as my lord's slave in place of the boy, and let the boy return with his brothers. How can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? No, do not let me see the misery that it would come on my father. So Judah, who, if you remember back to when Joseph is sold, it's Judah who comes up with that idea, right? Remember Reuben? If you go back several chapters now, if you go back to 37, it's Reuben who is like, put him in the cistern, and then Reuben, we're told in the back of his brain, is thinking, I'll come back and get him so he won't die. My brothers will cool off. I'll come back and get him, and we'll figure this out, right? But then we're told they sit down to eat their meal. Reuben is gone. In verse 26, Judah is the one who says, let's sell him. Let's get rid of Joseph this way. Judah's like, I don't want to kill him necessarily, but let's get rid of him, right? And so now we have Judah actually standing up and saying, no, the blame will fall on me if we don't return with Benjamin. So keep me here instead and send Benjamin back. So this is really like a full 180 for Judah. Again, remember, who also hasn't had the best track record in general. If you remember all the way back to chapter 38, we have the whole Judah and Tamar story. Same Judah. Who now is saying, hey, I made a promise to my father, he will die if Benjamin doesn't go back, so I will stay in Benjamin's stead. And Judah saying this really, one, demonstrates a complete 180 on Judah's part, but symbolically also kind of represents the entirety of the brothers themselves and this whole shift in mentality and emotional understanding that they've been able to develop and look at Joseph and say, no, if we don't go back with Benjamin, our father will die. What can we do instead, right? And this is what finally moves Joseph to what we know, if you can kind of sense in the story, to what we know is happening, which is going to be some sort of reveal and then some sort of ultimate reunion. But this Judah's action, Judah saying, hey, no, keep me, let Benjamin go, is what finally tips the scales for Joseph to reveal himself to them. Look at chapter 45. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants, and he cried out, have everyone leave my presence. So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, and Pharaoh's household heard about it. Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still living? But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, come close to me. When they had done so, he said, I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now, do not be distressed, and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will be no plowing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. Just note for a second here, this is like the little like smoke signals, as it were, of the Abrahamic promise and the Abrahamic covenant. So if there's no one in Egypt who knows there's going to be a famine and can prepare for it accordingly because of Egypt's vast resources, then not only do the nations suffer, Egypt and the surrounding nations, they suffer, they die, but Israel also will suffer and die. Note, if they don't go to Egypt, they die. They have no food. So not only is Israel, this tiny little fledgling, not even a nation yet, but this like clan, not only are they surviving because one member of them is able to kind of solve this world catastrophe, but the nations are blessed, which is exactly what the kind of stuff that God talks about happening. He says, through you and through your offspring, there will be blessing. And Joseph, yes? Maybe. I still think he's polytheistic, which again doesn't bother me. It's incredibly, Moses more than likely was polytheistic at first for a long time. But he's talking to them kind of almost on their own terms and kind of in their own language. And Joseph is seen kind of, again, he recognizes that the God of Israel is the one who's helping him interpret dreams and stuff like that. So yeah, there's this sense of kind of maybe this kind of polytheistic, not strict monotheism thing happening here, right? But he recognizes this enough and says, essentially he says, and the nations have been blessed. He's like, because I am here, people's lives have been spared. Again, even things down to like cattle and livestock have not died because we have grain here, right? Verse 8, so then it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, which is I don't know if you could say that really and get away with it, but he does. He made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household, and ruler of all Egypt. Now, hurry back to my father. Say to him, this is what your son Joseph says. God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, don't delay. You shall live in the region of Goshen and be near me, you, your children and your grandchildren, your flocks and herds and all you have. I will provide food for you there, or I will provide for you there because 5 years of famine are still to come. Otherwise, you and your household and all who belong to you will become destitute. You can see for yourselves, and so can my brother Benjamin, that it is really I who am speaking to you. Tell my father about all the honor accorded to me in Egypt and about everything you have seen, and bring my father down here quickly. Then they, of course, have this kind of reunion moment. Here's my question that doesn't get addressed even later in the chapter. Because the brothers do this. They go back to their father Jacob. They put all their households together and they caravan, to Egypt, and they set up in the land of Goshen. But nowhere does it get explained. Oh yeah, Joseph's alive. They tell him that much. But then there's no Q&A about, but wait, he's alive, great. But didn't you tell me that he was killed by a wild animal? Or what actually happened there? It never seems to get addressed, which I just wonder about. I'm like, did they tell him? Or is it one of those things where the brothers kind of get together and they kind of agree? Like even with Joseph, in Egypt, they kind of all are together and they agree, okay, just tell him I'm alive. Tell him that, something happened. We can leave the whole you trying to kill me and you selling me into slavery out of what we tell dad, right? Maybe that's what they decided to do. I don't know. But then we're told that Pharaoh himself learns about what's going on, right? So verse 16, when the news reached Pharaoh's palace that Joseph's brothers had come, Pharaoh and all his officials were pleased. Pharaoh said to Joseph, tell your brothers, do this, load your animals and return to the land of Canaan and bring your father and your families back to me. I will give you the best of the land of Egypt and you can enjoy the fat of that land. You are also directed to tell them, do this, take some carts from Egypt for your children and your wives and get your father and come. Never mind about your belongings because the best of all Egypt will be yours. So the sons of Israel did this. Joseph gave them carts as Pharaoh commanded, and he also gave them provisions for their journey. To each of them he gave new clothing, but to Benjamin he gave 300 shekels of silver and 5 sets of clothes. And the favoritism continues. And this is what he sent to his father: 10 donkeys loaded with the best things in Egypt, and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain and bread and other provisions for his journey. Then he sent his brothers away, and as they were leaving, he said to them, "Don't quarrel on the way," basically saying, just let the past be in the past. He's like, we don't need to bring up all this again. Everything is okay now. We're moving forward, right? He's like, don't, because he knows, and we all know that you have this really kind of high point, this Mount Everest type moment, and then you start walking back down, and things start kind of bubbling up again, and you're like, I thought I resolved that, but clearly I haven't resolved that as much as I thought I resolved that, and here we are, I'm going to bring that up. And we just all had Thanksgiving with family maybe, so maybe even some of those things came bubbling up for you, I don't know. But I thought I dealt with that, but I haven't. And Joseph knows, and he himself is human, of course, and he's like, this is kind of the human condition, is we kind of simmer and stew on things and kind of bring them up. And so he tells them, don't quarrel while you're going. He's like, just let the past be in the past. We're going to move forward. So they went up out of Egypt and came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. They told him, Joseph is still alive. Oops. In fact, he is ruler of all Egypt. Jacob was stunned. He did not believe them. But when they told him everything Joseph had said to them, and when he saw the carts Joseph had sent to carry him back, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. And Israel said, I am convinced my son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die. Which is this great kind of turnaround, remember, because we have Jacob just mere chapter earlier saying, I will die and I will go down into the grave. And now he's like, no, I will go down and see Joseph. Right? So we get this kind of flip for him where we're told his spirit is revived. He's quite old. He is an old man at this point. Even by biblical standards, he is an old man. And instead of his soul or of him going down into the place of the dead, he says, I will go down and see Joseph. Right? So this is kind of this full circle sense of blessing and sense of restoration that we have here, especially for Jacob and then, of course, for Joseph as well. But the language itself indicates that, of course, as we're told, Jacob's spirit is revived, right? We have a lot of parallels, or a lot of kind of little tiny, not even parallels, but just little tiny hints throughout these 4 chapters here of both things that have been already in the story and things that are coming both in Genesis later and also in the book of Exodus. Look with me just quickly at 42 again. Go back. Because we're told, we get Jacob mentioned again in verse 1. When Jacob learned there was no grain in Egypt, right? We're told, but Jacob, verse 4, did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother. So we get Jacob mentioned twice, both because he's kind of the main character of the first few verses here, but also because we haven't heard of him for several chapters. It's all been Joseph, 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 right? So Jacob is reintroduced. But notice what happens. We get Jacob learns there's no grain. Jacob did not send Benjamin. Verse 5, it would be natural to say, so Jacob's sons were among those, but it doesn't. It says, so Israel's sons, right? You could also translate it technically as Israelites, but Israel's sons go down to Egypt, which of course is the kind of the first mention we have of this happening, which then of course sets up them setting up homes in Egypt, and then opens up the book of Exodus for us, which we read the first part of Exodus, the first few verses. It's a little bit about how they got there, and then you come down to I can't remember if it's verse 5, 6, or 7, somewhere in there, and then we're told that there arose a Pharaoh who knew not Joseph, and things go downhill from there, right? So it's not Joseph's brothers, it's not Jacob's sons who go down to Israel, or who go down to Egypt, it's Israel. It's the Israelites, it's Israel's sons, is how the text says it, who goes down to Egypt. And it kind of is this precursor of the language kind of telling us, hey, Israel is going to set up shop in Egypt for what's going to be over 400 years. We also get kind of this language again of Jacob's spirit being revived, of him coming almost up out of the place of death, He's hanging on by a thread, and he hears that Joseph is alive, and also that Benjamin is okay. And then, of course, we're assuming that Simeon is released at some point. We never hear about him again. Hopefully, he's doing much better. But all of the brothers are reunited, and Jacob's spirit is revived, and then he is like, let's go to Egypt. Pharaoh is excited as well that Joseph's family has been found. We don't know what story Pharaoh knew about Jacob's family, but he clearly cares for Joseph enough that when Joseph's family is found, Pharaoh is excited. So they clearly have a very good relationship. And they're told, hey, we'll set you up in the land of Goshen, which was a good place to be in Egypt. It was farmable. It had resources there. And Pharaoh says, we will deck you out. You don't even need to bring most of your stuff with you. We will take care of you, right? So this is good for them. This is a good setup, which again, in some ways, if you kind of, again, 180 it to the Exodus event that we get about halfway through the book of Exodus, when they leave Egypt, we're told that they plunder the Egyptians on their way out, right? The Israelites, during the Exodus, when Moses leads them out, the Egyptians are so anxious for them to leave that they say, take all of our gold, take all of our silver, take all of our precious stuff, and get out. Right? So on both ends of this drama of Israel being in Egypt, we have Pharaoh initially welcoming them in, saying, we'll take care of you, we'll give you whatever you need to set things up. Come, we'll send you, we'll take care of you, make sure you have goods and all kinds of things. And then when they leave Egypt, again, some 400 plus years later, we're told the language is they plunder the Egyptians, right? Ostensibly, the things that they take are then what they melt down to make the tabernacle. People are always like, where did the gold and silver and all this fine material and the rich fabrics and all this stuff come from if they're in the middle of the wilderness and God's telling them to build the tabernacle with all of this, it's got to be this much gold and then silver and these fine gems and stones. It came from Egypt. It came from Egypt. So, but on the bookends of their time in Egypt, the Egyptians give them stuff. And of course, as we learn later, they're going to flourish in Egypt. They're going to be fruitful and multiply. They're going to grow. They're going to become a little too powerful, a little too numerous for the new Pharaoh to be comfortable with, right? But this is the beginning of what's coming, not only for the rest of Genesis, which there's just a few chapters, there's not much left really, and then all of the book of Exodus. Not only how they end up in Egypt, but then their encounters with the Egyptians that Moses has with Pharaoh, how they get out of Egypt, all of those things, these few chapters here and Joseph being in Egypt are the beginnings of that rest of that portion of the rest of the story of Israel's kind of time in Egypt. Again, over 400 years, which God told Abraham would happen. It says your children and your descendants are going to be slaves in a foreign land. God says, I won't forget them, but that's what's going to happen. And so this, again, connects us back to God's promise and God talking to Abraham, but also pulls us forward into the story of the book of Exodus. And so the Joseph story is kind of like the hinge between Genesis and Exodus, because it gets us to Egypt, which is necessary for the rest of the story to keep moving forward. Okay, let me pause right there. Lots of chapters today. Questions, thoughts, comments? Yeah, Tomas.
So on chapter 42, you talked about Israel's sons
Mm-hmm.
to Egypt. Now I'm just thinking about in terms of timeline and when this was written,
Mm-hmm.
then versus Exodus, for them to be using that kind of language here
Mm-hmm.
versus was that written later, so that's why they used that kind of language?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it more of a I don't believe there's a coincidence there.
Sure. So why, you're asking why in verse 5 of chapter 42, does it switch to Israel? And are we referring to him as Israel? And does it mean, when was this part of Genesis finally redacted and kind of composed? My take on it for this is that, because we've had him referred to as Israel a few other times. Remember, he gets that name change from Jacob to Israel when he wrestles with God before he goes and meets Esau, right? But we still get him, even after that name change, he's still referred to as Jacob in the story. Yeah, he's still referred to as Jacob, but sometimes the author or authors will refer to him as Israel in the story, and it kind of bounces back and forth. I think here, and specifically in chapter 42, in those first 5 verses, it's being used to make a point, because we get him referred to as Jacob twice, kind of to remind us, oh yeah, this guy exists, because we've been only talking about Joseph for several chapters. But then in verse 5, when it says, so Israel's sons went to Egypt. I think the authors of Genesis are making a point saying this is kind of symbolically the nation of Israel. Not all of them, because Jacob, of course, is still, in Canaan. But the nation of Israel is making moves to go to Egypt. And it's kind of signaling, hey, the rest of the story is coming, right? Because we've seen a few places where he has been referred to as Israel instead of Jacob, right? And it's weird because someone asked, I can't remember who asked, if it was in this class or maybe the next one, someone asked after we read the part about Jacob wrestling with God and the name change, they're like, so why is he still called Jacob literally a sentence later? Like if his name is changed, why don't we call him Israel? And why do we call him Jacob? Sometimes I think that it's for clarity's sake, because even now when we just today as modern readers, we talk about the patriarchs, we say Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We don't say Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, right? I think sometimes we do that for clarity between the individual and then kind of using Israel as a plural, kind of as a nation. So I think that might even be some of what's going on here. Sometimes when we go back and forth between Jacob and Israel. It also gets confusing because when we get the divided kingdom, you have Israel in the north, Judah in the south. And so even that becomes confusing because Israel then comes to only represent 10 tribes instead of 2, right? And so there's a lot of confusion around, as you read the Old Testament specifically, and even in the New Testament, there's a few issues with it. Who do we mean when we say Israel? Do we mean an individual? Do we mean a nation that's 12 tribes? Or do we mean a kind of nation that's only 10 tribes? Because once we get to the divided kingdom after Solomon, Israel comes to mean only 10 tribes and Judah comes to mean 2. Because you have this split kingdom, right? The north and the south. So this is just kind of a good Bible reading tip. As you read the Old Testament specifically, and again, the New Testament a little bit, we have some issues about who exactly is Israel and what does that mean. You got to kind of be careful where you are in the story with what is meant by Israel. Again, is it a person, one individual? Is it Jacob? Is it a family, like we kind of have here? It's not quite a nation yet. Is it a full-fledged kind of nation? Or is it the 10 tribes in the north? Because when you get the prophets who prophesied to the northern kingdom, they're going to say Israel. Are they meaning all 12 tribes, or are they only meaning the 10 that they're prophesying to? These are kind of questions that biblical scholars have to wrestle with and work through. So we just got to be careful with language. But I do think here it's pointing to, hey, we have Jacob mentioned twice, and then it shifts to calling him Israel. I think it's intentional that it shifts to calling him Israel, thus kind of signaling to us as readers the kind of clan, almost maybe nation-sized people known as Israel are moving into Egypt and something's happening. Yeah. What else? Mm-hmm. Right.
But, so, does he evolve? Because he sees, he could have done so many things.
Right.
I just wonder, I know that God, we all know that God is in you.
Yes.
But did it take him that long to get it? Or
Sure. And here's the, you're going to have people who read this and like, oh, he only worshiped God the whole time. And that's probably what most of us have been taught, right? Yeah, I'm just way more comfortable with the reality that most of them were way more polytheistic than we think they were.
But
His family wasn't, to a point, because we still have issues with them having household gods pretty often, right? If you were like, pretty often, where Jacob just mere chapters earlier had to bury all of the household gods that they had accumulated and been worshiping. So again, this idea that even in Genesis or even in Exodus or even in Leviticus, that anywhere, Israel is strictly monotheistic for any long period of time, They're not. They're not. And again, this is just kind of a side note. There are degrees of monotheism. So when we say monotheism, we typically mean two things. We generally mean worship of one God, and kind of for us in our culture and as Christians, what we also mean when we say that more subtly is worship of one God and, or comma, semicolon, whatever, however you want to phrase it, because only one God exists. That's generally what we mean when we talk about monotheism. We say worship of one God and or because only one God exists. I don't think there's a single place in the Bible that points to that reality. I'm monotheist in that I believe in only worship the God of the Bible. But here's the thing, and I talk about this all the time. If other gods, like little g gods, didn't exist, why are we warned against worshiping them all over the Bible? Why is one of literally the first commandments, have no other gods before me, if no other gods actually exist? This is like a legitimate question. Like, if no other gods exist, why are we warned against worshiping them so often? If there are no other principalities and powers of the air that we could be worshiping instead of the one true God, then what are we concerned about then? Right? Who else are they worshiping if they don't exist, right?
What else do we worship them for?
Oh, lots of things.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Brings that up.
Yeah. So yeah, they're absolutely, I mean, again, I talk about this all the time. Paul tells us our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places, i.e., little g gods that exist for real and that you can give your life and allegiance to. These are the things that animate and give power and energy, and I don't mean woo-woo energy, I mean real substantial power and energy to things like violence and hate and love of money and love of self above all else, and all of those types of things that the nations of this world are so bound up in. They are real forces that are anti-God's kingdom, that we are all tempted to worship and to give our lives to. Now, you're not going to maybe have a little idol of power or of like money or sex or whatever. You're not going to like carry it on your pocket, right? But like we give ourselves to these real, actual energy. And again, I don't mean like woo-woo. I mean like it's real. And the Bible warns us against this, right? So back to my point, I'm monotheist in that I say we as Christians should and do by definition only worship one God, the God of the Scriptures. But other little g gods exist, and we best watch out. Now we're also told we don't have to have a spirit of fear, but that doesn't mean we're not aware. That doesn't mean we're not intelligent and we don't keep guard. But yeah, it's so when we read the Bible, this idea of monotheism as being, only worship one God because only one God exists, it's not there. Only worship one God, yes. I mean, the Ten Commandments, pretty straightforward. Only worship me, the one God of the Bible, God tells them, right? Have no other gods before me. Worship only me. All those things, the first 3 commandments, right? We get kind of over and over again. Don't make a graven image, right? But the reason those 3 are so important is because doing the opposite of those 3 things is a real opportunity for us and holds real danger. Again, my point, if there are no other gods to worship, then why are we warned against them so often in the Bible? It's because they're real. And because we are prone to want to worship them instead of the one true God, because they offer us immediate temporal things that the earth values rather than the kingdom of God values, right? Okay, I got time for maybe one more thought or question, if it's there, and if not, that's okay.
Would another idea be that Joseph had to make sure he fit in with the Egyptians?
Yeah, another take on it might be that Joseph is trying to fit in with the Egyptians and make sure that he can kind of kind of fit in and play their game and navigate their world. So that's another take on it, maybe. You are, of course, going to hear a lot of preachers and Bible teachers and people who were like, no, Joseph only worshipped the God of Israel, and maybe he did. This is a personal. I'm a little bit more personally comfortable with saying he more than likely was polytheistic, at least for a time, simply because he lived there for so long and was so exposed to all of that stuff. Maybe he wasn't. I don't know. It's not a hill I'm going to die on at all. Like, it's not the point of the story. But it comes up a little bit in kind of these little places. But Joseph does, ultimately, of course, when he talks to his brothers, he says, God did this, God did this, God did this, right? And we, of course, as Christians, we look and say, of course he did. Like, we look back and we're able to read the story and we're like, yeah, God directed all of these steps, right? Much like he directs all of our steps today. Great. Let me pray for us, and we'll be done. God, thank you so much for being with us as we study the story of Joseph. Would you, Holy Spirit, continue to use this story to speak to us this week as we think and meditate on it? God, would you be with us as we head home and get us there safely and bring us back next week to continue on this journey together? In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.